of more positive issues like technologies to combat climate change or the need for political action on environmental topics to avert catastrophe?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Irene. I think it's very important to remember that politicians have a specific interest in the type of information that helps them in their political maneuvering and also in dealing with their constituencies. And when we deal with politicians specifically, they basically raise 4 questions. Any type of information, either it's from the media or from the scientist or from some other kind of information giver. Number 1 is, what does that mean, or does it affect my constituency? That's the first issue. Now, it's not meant cynically. I mean, these people need to be re-elected, and they're very much concerned about, is my constituency affected by this? If not, well, they have a second question, which is basically, is there anyone who disagrees? Politicians are very sensitive if they get one-sided information, because normally they expect that everybody will sell their kind of news or their kind of message in order to gain something. So they will ask, is there another side to it? Just like journalists, they ask the same question. The third question they basically raise is, does it mobilize my opponents? So if it doesn't affect my constituency, but it may affect my opponents, and they may get something out of this, and I need to know this in advance, that's early warning for politicians. Not so much that life is maybe at disposal, but more, you know, is there something in there where I could lose face within the system? And the last question is, can I get public attention with this? And I think we need to take care of these 4 questions. And I think the media, of course, know that partially, and they certainly tailor part of their information toward these 4 questions. But even more so, scientists who get very frustrated very often in dealing with politicians need to know that if they say, well, we tell you what, you know, the objective world is all about, and about the science, and about our models, and about the outcomes, the uncertainties. And they're going to say, well, what does it mean to my constituencies? And that can be very frustrating for the scientist. But I think we need to acknowledge that that is the type of arena in which politicians act, and in which they have to act. The next day they are on TV and they have to talk about this issue, and they know there's a constituency watching, there's the opponents watching, and there's a public watching. And if they make a very bad impression on all 3 of them, they may be their last talk show. And I think we need to be attentive to those needs. And you can combine it. You can combine the kind of scientific information that you'd like to convey with those 4 questions in mind, because otherwise you either don't get the attention, or the politician will somehow have second thoughts about when you talk and ask these questions to him or herself, not really listening.
All right, I'd like to stay with that, the idea of getting into the talk shows, getting the message across in a way that's attractive. I'd also like us all to keep Stefan Krug's statement in mind, or the accusation, if you like, or the suggestion that perhaps we can't be dramatic enough, or that we have to do more to get that really urgent message across. Also bearing in mind, well, we live in the age of the talk show, but we also live in the age of the internet, multimedia. People want their information preferably in a 10-second soundbite, snappy headline, super short reports, preferably with pictures, moving pictures. James Painter talked about the importance of television pictures, flashing lights. At the same time, science tends to work very slowly, and scientists are quite reluctant to come out with definite findings until they're absolutely sure. So, where is the happy medium there? What ideas have we got for getting that message over in the talk shows, in the short sound bites, without it being too shallow? Or can we do justice, for instance, to climate science, and still also do justice to people's media tastes? Can we start with James?
Well, I think the soundbite, my experience of the soundbite is probably counterintuitive. I've worked a lot on radio and done a lot of radio packaging, and worked a lot on scientists. And very, very often, the initial reaction of scientists is, oh my God, I can't possibly say that in 17 seconds, which is the average soundbite on a BBC TV news bulletin is about 17 seconds. I think it's gone down 7 seconds in the last 10 years, something like that. But actually, when you sit down and build up a relationship with a scientist or group of scientists about trying to capture complexity or capture a key message, I'm always surprised at actually how much they can say in a short period. And I would appeal to all of you who are scientists, you know, don't be put off by that soundbite culture. The other thing, the point I would make is, I think there's a real problem with headlines, actually. That they're often, it's the headlines that cause the problems. Some of you may be aware, and I've done some studies myself, Professor Mike Hume at the University of East Anglia did this study on the IPCC reports and the UK press treatment of them. And the thrust of it was that the headlines all spoke of devastating, catastrophic, all terrifying, you know, all words that were not used in the IPCC report, but were all used in the headlines of serious broadsheet newspapers in the UK. And I have constant battles with people writing headlines as to whether they do reflect the science. The problem is, of course, that, you know, even for the website now for the BBC, if you don't get a good headline, you don't get the hits, or it's one factor in creating hits. And another really important fact about the internet now is what we call the clickogram phenomenon. So if you don't get clicks and you don't, you know, in real time, people can see now, the editors can see which stories are being seen. So if you don't get a good headline, you might, you know, be well down the clickogram and, you know, they won't want your next story. Finally, I do think actually you can make serious points about the science in a relatively short time and do justice to the science. I will, again, this is slightly propagandistic on behalf of the BBC, but if you go to the video website of the BBC and look at the reports by David Shukman, the BBC TV environment correspondent, I'm amazed at how he does justice to the science on stories like sea level rises in 59 seconds. There's one up there at the moment. You know, when the story came out from the meeting of the Copenhagen scientists, broadly saying that the IPCC estimates were very conservative. The way he did that was he went to an East Coast town in the UK with a tape measure. And he said, this is what the IPCC was saying. This is now what a whole group of different scientists are saying about 1 meter. And he stood on the sort of stone pier and showed with the tape measure what scientists were now saying. And he did manage in 59 seconds, I think, to do justice to the science, but illustrated in a serious way. So you can get round the soundbite culture.
Okay. Richard Klein, you wanted to say something about that?